The detective said, side chick, that's his baby mama. And there's a possibility that boy is his son. I'm thinking we're supposed to be the good guys. He's supposed to be watching my back.
This cop just can't believe that his fellow officer has murdered his girlfriend and his own baby. Now, as barbaric as this may sound, today we'll be uncovering similar cops who were caught doing the unthinkable and were sent to prison for life.
The person that was using that car at the time was supposed to meet a border patrol agent at the Father Magnoble Park.
Okay.
The transmission that came in was the boyfriend's name was Anthony Burgos.
Okay.
When the radio transmission came up for Anthony Burgos, there was only one border patrol agent that was at that location with us. I had just seen him. I had never seen this person before. I see him. He's right near the car, and so I wave him over. I say, "Hey, come here." As he's walking up to us, the name says Burgos. So we look at the name. I'm looking at the name as he's coming over, and I'm just like, "Hey, what?" I think this is the person they just called over the radio, but they said Anthony, and I look at the first name and it's an R.
Ronald Burgos had just committed the ultimate blunder, and he was about to be taken to the cleaners by his fellow Border Patrol agents who wouldn't fall for his bluff.
Tells him, "Hey, what's your name, man?" And he says, "Ronald Burgos." And we're looking for Anthony Burgos. And radio transmissions are coming through, and so it's kind of getting a little hectic. Burgos approaches closer to Reyes. I'm walking next to him. I'm the only uniformed officer. So I'm right next to him, and he says, "Hey man, what's your name?" And then Burgos says, "Ronald Burgos Aviles." He only uses his last names. So then Rick's like, "What's your name, dude? Why are you not telling me your name? What's your name?" And he says, "My name's Ronald Burgos Aviles." And he says, You're not telling me your name. Do you have an ID or something?" And he's like, "No, I don't have an ID."
The Border Patrol agent had just arrived after murdering his ex-girlfriend, the mother of his child Griselda Hernandez, and his 1-year-old baby Dominic Hernandez. It was appalling to see how Burgos reacted after doing something as heinous as this.
Yes, so once I took the belt off, I put it behind his unit, and then I patted him down as the unit approached us. So I patted him down. I located a phone on him and a driver's license in his shirt pocket.
Okay, so, and what did you do with those 2 items?
I turned over the driver's license to Detective Reyes, and the cell phone, I put it with his property that I had already taken, which was his Sam Brown. I put it in the back of his truck.
The prosecutor moved forward to show the court the dash cam video of the arrest of the Border Patrol agent. As you can see, the corrupt officer had no remorse on his face.
I'm sorry, brother. 7643-513-851, yes.
What is it that he's doing in that scene?
He's wiping his arms. It looks like he's cleaning something off, or
What was it that he did right before he wiped his arms?
he licked his finger.
Officer Ronald Burgos was desperately wiping his arms and even sucking his fingers, trying to remove any trace of evidence. He had just used a knife to his ex-girlfriend and their young son, with the evidence plainly visible to everyone.
Come on, man. Oh yeah, he could have just told me straight up, man. So I'm making me go forward. Embarrassing, big ordeal.
As the trial progressed, witnesses came forward, and amongst them was a key witness, another Border Patrol agent, Francisco Lara, who made a shocking revelation.
I look south and I see the silhouette of the young woman. So I completely forget about Mr. Burgos and I start running towards the victim.
See the victim?
As soon as I see the victim, I approach and I start yelling, like, Señora, despierta, estás despierta. Ma'am, wake up. Because at this time, all I see is blood. I told my trainee, I call him Schmitty. I like, Schmitty, is that what I think I'm looking at? And I see the silhouette and I immediately start running towards her. And that's when I tell him, like, I start yelling at her, estás despierta, are you awake? Do you have any gloves? He's like, no, I do not. So I say, I don't have any gloves. And I asked my trainee, Schmitty, do you have any gloves? And thankfully, being the great agent that he was, he did have a pair of gloves.
Burgos had devised a strategy, as moments after his ex-wife and son, he ended up calling the cops, claiming that a murder had been committed. Officer Lara explains how he tried to con everyone.
And I immediately check for a pulse. I don't feel a pulse. I look at my fingers and they're covered in blood because I checked her neck area. So I don't feel a pulse. So I immediately see her left wrist. It's facing up. I check her wrist and again I do not feel a pulse. Right away I tell Mr. Burgos, sir, I think she's 10-7, which means that she's dead. And he's like, yeah, it looks that way. So I'm radioing everything in to our station and I'm letting him know what I'm seeing. At this time, he's standing there. Not really, the supervisor normally takes control of the situation and radios in everything to the station. Once again, he's quiet. I'm the one relaying everything that I'm seeing to the station. I'm processing everything in, I'm taking it in. And I'm telling them what I'm seeing. And right away, I start telling the camera operator to start scanning the river. I tell him, scan the river, see if you see anybody going back.
Burgos had used his police training, carry out the crime in a bushy area, where Griselda ended up having 27 stabs, and baby Dominic had received 2 as well.
Next to the victim, I check her. Mr. Burgos is standing over here I guess on the other side of her. So I tell him she's 10-7, which means she's dead. Radio everything in. I told base 2, I think she's dead. They tell me take a step back, treat her as a crime scene. So before anything, I told my trainee, go to the gate and open it for the paramedics. He takes off. So before I take a step back, I'm surprised to see so much blood. So I grab my head and I'm like, where is all this blood coming from? I take a step back. At the time he picks her up, I could see the shadow of her face.
Officer Lara, a junior at the crime scene, could not believe his eyes as he watched his senior, Officer Burgos, handle the victim with shocking indifference and remained completely unfazed by the brutality of his action.
I get a phone call from my team leader. My team leader tells me, hey, we already activated the Border Patrol unions, the lawyers for you. Before you make any statements, we already got lawyers. And I'm like, we already made our official statement. He was surprised. He's like, oh, you did? I'm like, yes. He's like, before he hangs up, he's like, just so you know, there's a rumor saying that the dead woman is Burgos' side chick. I'm like, all right, 10-4, let me call you back.
It wasn't until detectives began investigating the murder that Officer Lara realized that the woman was Burgos' ex-girlfriend and the mother of his child. This revelation left him in a deeply emotional and shocked state.
We just heard her.
Going to question answer basis, Mr.
I'm good, sir. Thank you, Your Honor.
That is exactly how everyone in the court felt, and we can only imagine the condition of Griselda's family. It turned out Burgos had committed this horrible act just because he was refusing to pay child support. Finally, after listening to hours of testimonies and getting evidence, the jury reached a verdict.
In cause number 2018 CRA 852D1, in the case of the state of Texas versus Ronald Anthony Burgos Aviles, The jury has returned a unanimous verdict. I'm about to read the verdict of this jury on punishment as to count number 1. Special issue number 1 on count 1. Whether there is a probability that the defendant, Ronald Anthony Burgos Aviles, would commit criminal act of violence that would constitute a continuing threat to society. Answer, yes. Signed by the foreperson. Whether taking into consideration all the evidence, including the circumstances of the offense, the defendant's character and background, and the personal moral culpability of the defendant, there is a sufficient mitigating circumstance or circumstances to warrant that a sentence of life imprisonment without parole rather than a death sentence be imposed. Answer, yes. Signed by the foreperson of the jury.
The jury unanimously decided that Burgos would receive life imprisonment instead of the death penalty. Now, many might argue that the death sentence would have been a more fitting punishment for such a heinous crime.
You heard me announce the verdict of the jury with regard to both counts of this indictment. It is now my job to sentence you in accordance with that indictment, with that verdict. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
After being found guilty by this jury of 2 counts of capital murder, and after giving us the verdict that they have just announced, it is my job now to pronounce sentence. As to count 1 of capital murder, and as a result of the sentence of the verdict of the jury, you will be sentenced on count 1 as to capital murder to a term of life without the possibility of parole. As to count 2,
Burgos was immediately transferred to the jail and is guaranteed to die there. This shocking encounter truly left everyone speechless, and it is even more saddening that it took 5 years for justice to be delivered to the poor victim's family. Well, nothing might top the brutality shown by this officer, but this next tyrant made another huge mistake.
Nothing in his hands, and he was shot twice in.
In 2011, during a routine traffic stop, Officer Osvaldo Villarreal fatally shot an unarmed Benny Herrera. The victim's family filed a lawsuit, but it took 5 years for the case to reach pretrial, as Villarreal's attorney attempted to argue for qualified immunity.
It's a tragic case, there's no question about that. But Officer Villarreal was required to make a split-second life and death decision.
What required him to do that? It doesn't look to me as though he was the initiator.
The fact that Mr. Herrera, first of all, he had been acting erratically before the shots were fired, moved from a place of relative safety on the shoulder of the road into the roadway. He was skipping.
But if we're talking about Officer Villarreal, how much did he know about the prior behavior?
He saw all of that.
I have to say what you're saying is inconsistent with what I saw on his own camera. That is to say, the point at which he began to get close enough to see anything. Some of that earlier stuff was on the other camera, but not on his.
Officer Villarreal had shot the poor suspect only a second after he asked him to take his hands out of his pocket, and sadly, the attorney was defending this monster.
All at one point, his camera was turned on, but he testified.
His camera was turned on well before he got to the scene.
He testified in deposition that he saw Mr. Herrera on the side of the road, and then he saw.
Well, he can testify to what he wants to testify to, but I want to tell you what I saw on his own camera tells me that the early part of this he did not see, could not see. That was his intention, you say?
That was his intention, and now, that's in his deposition.
Again, I'm relying on what's on the videotape, and now this is in Officer Villarreal's car. I hear him say, "Take your hand out of your pocket," and I hear the gunshot almost simultaneously.
Exactly.
They cannot be separated by more than a second.
And that's exactly the time period when Officer Villarreal had to make his decision.
Shockingly, even the police department cleared Officer Villarreal's conduct, but the judge had another idea.
Here, Mr. Herrera was arguably complying with Officer Villarreal's order to remove his hand from his pocket. at the time that he was shot. So how is it that we determine that we should grant qualified immunity?
Because qualified immunity allows for police officers to make mistakes. It allows for the possibility that officers will make mistakes in judgment, and that's exactly what happened here. Officer Villarreal had a choice to make. Do I wait and see whether there's something in the hand that could kill me, or do I shoot? And he made the decision to fire. We know, with the benefit of hindsight, obviously, that that was wrong.
Is it safe?
The officer was about to face the consequences of his actions as the judge unanimously decided that his qualified immunity should be tossed.
As long as the historic facts are undisputed, the question of whether or not Officer Villarreal's actions were reasonable is a question of law. It's not a question that you give to a jury, because we don't want juries second-guessing the very, very difficult life and death decisions that officers have to make.
I agree, but at this stage, again, this is not an argument to a jury. For us to even have jurisdiction over this case, we take those facts. Yes. You're saying that as a matter of law, the shooting here was legal.
Yes, it was objectively reasonable. Well, not just those facts. Officer Villarreal knew that Mr. Herrera was a suspect in a domestic violence incident. Okay. He knew that he had gang affiliation, that he was on parole, that he had a warrant out for his arrest. All of those things factor into
on parole. I don't remember on parole. They said
on parole, yes, and there was a warrant out for his arrest.
What do we know about what Officer Villarreal knew with respect to whether he was armed?
We know that dispatch told Officer Villarreal and Officer Miali that Mr. Herrera was not known to be armed.
The attorney continued to make bizarre and illogical arguments, but the judges swiftly rejected them, firmly believing that the officer should at least stand trial for his actions.
No, sir, the suspect had refused to put up his hands, had threatened the officers, and an officer believed that she saw something in the suspect's hand, saw him move his arm, and was worried he was going to shoot her. But yet we affirmed the denial of qualified immunity in part because the suspect had not brandished a weapon or spoken of a weapon.
I do recall that case, Your Honor.
The domestic violence incident was over.
Yes, and there...
So, I mean, how does that strengthen your case? I mean, that was, if you're arguing that it was an ongoing domestic violence, so...
it wasn't an ongoing domestic violence incident, but he was warrant out for his arrest, that he had known gang affiliations, and all of those things factor into, am I afraid of this encounter, or do I think that this is going to be a perfectly safe encounter? And everything that they observed, or a lot of the things that they observed, heightened the situation to a point where it was objectively reasonable for the officers. Nobody disputes that, for example, that it wasn't objectively reasonable for the officers to have their guns out. They were going to do a felony stop. Domestic violence under California law is a felony. So they had their guns out. There's some question about whether or not there were other alternatives available. Well, in the split second that decision had to be made, you couldn't put the gun down and pick up a baton. You couldn't put the gun down and pick up a taser, assuming that Officer Villarreal even had a taser. I think there's testimony in the record that he didn't have a taser available to him. He had to make a decision based solely on what he knew at the time. And it's easy for us to sit in hindsight and say, well, Mr. Herrera didn't have a gun. Mr. Herrera didn't really pose any
I don't
threat.
think anyone here said that one time.
No,
I think what we're focusing on, again, the narrow standard we have to deal with here. That's what we're dealing with. This is not a jury trial. This is not summary judgment. It's a very limited thing. No one here has raised about the fact he didn't have a gun.
I understand. The trial court did.
The plaintiff's attorney stepped forward and presented compelling arguments that further solidified the need for the officer to face trial, strengthening the case against him.
And that the officers perceived a heavy object in that pocket. That's...
First part, yes. Second part, a little less clear. But I think there's no question that he had his hand in his pocket.
Well, and both officers said it looked like he had something heavy in his pocket.
Okay.
All right. And then just before Mr. Villarreal opened fire, Mr. Herrera rapidly removed his hand and moved quickly, it seemed like, toward the officer's car. Why isn't that enough?
Well, because sticking on the undisputed facts, the officers had no information that any weapon was involved in a crime. They were specifically told he was not known to carry weapons. He had nothing in his hands, and he was shot twice and killed. We specifically asked the officers about their training, and they conceded, which is included in the cites in our brief, that deadly force is a last resort, only to be used in the direst of circumstances, only when no other reasonable measures are available. And
finally, the judges reached a conclusion and gave one last shut-up call to the defense attorney.
If everything goes bad for your client, that is to say, if we send it back, if the jury says no qualified immunity, and if the jury comes in with an award of some amount of damages, will your client pay those damages out of his own pocket, or will it be paid by his employer?
It should be 99.9% of the times it's paid by the employer. I don't see why it would be different.
Well, by statute, California statute says it's paid by the employer unless they're punitives.
Yes,
isn't that right?
That was what I was going to say.
So that doesn't say 99%, it says 100.
Well, I was going to say, unless there were, if there were punitive damages, the city would have the option of deciding whether to pay those.
Just when you think nothing would get more sinister than this, next officer did something even worse.
It's clear to me that you're a remorseless killer. You strangled your wife, you murdered her.
Cops sometimes break the very laws they are sworn to protect, thinking that they will get away with it. But sometimes, karma catches up and they face justice in court. Today we'll be looking at cases where corrupt officers got swift karma in the courtroom.
And he used his badge, and he used his position to satisfy his own desires. He is a cop who turned into a killer.
Starting off with ex-officer Daniel Howard, who was convicted for his wife for 2 years. Daniel claimed it was a suicide, but finally, after an investigation, he was found guilty and brought to trial.
Count 1 is the defendant Daniel C. Howard guilty or not guilty of domestic battery? Guilty. Count 2 is the defendant Daniel C. Howard guilty or not guilty of murder in the first degree? Not guilty. Is the defendant Daniel Howard guilty or not guilty of second-degree murder? Guilty.
Counsel, I'm proposing a sentencing date of May 23rd at 1:30 p.m. That's available. I will order a PSI or a pre-sentence investigation. Mr. Howard, I'll have you talk with your attorney about that. You have the right to participate or not participate in that. You continue to have the right to remain silent. Mr. Howard is remanded into custody. I'll see everyone back May 23rd at 1:30 for sentencing. We will be in recess.
Daniel mercilessly strangled Kendi out of jealousy. Kendi's daughter delivered an emotional statement in the courtroom, leaving a lasting impact.
I struggle with guilt and I struggle with not knowing. I wish I could have convinced her to stay with me instead of going home that night. The fear on her face and in her voice when she told me about how she woke up with him standing over her will never leave me. Nothing will fill the hole he has created. Nothing can fix or undo what he has done. But her name can be free. The thought that he can no longer have control over her name, her memory, and her spirit gives me a sense of peace.
Despite all the proof being against him, Daniel continued to plead innocence, but the judge made sure to take him to the cleaners.
I'm not that monster, I assure you, that people are portraying me to be.
But what we know, beyond a reasonable doubt, is that you strangled your wife, you murdered her, and then you staged her body in the bathtub, shot her through the mouth, and tried to pass this off as a suicide. That's proven beyond a reasonable doubt. In horrible crimes like this, everybody wants to know why. And often we don't know why, and I can't get inside your brain, but the pretty clear evidence, I agree with the state, is that this was due to jealousy, greed, pride, anger, revenge, some combination of that.
While committing a murder was evil enough, Howard even went on to portray it as a suicide, further proving just how big of a monster he is. It is tough to think that at some point he was a law enforcement officer.
You didn't just when you killed Kendi, you didn't just kill your wife. You killed a mother, you killed a grandmother, a sister, a daughter, a worker, somebody who brought a lot of life and light to those around her and those she touched. And you snuffed that out because of your own pride, greed, and anger. Despite your efforts at the time to appear emotional and sad and distraught, it's clear to me that you're a remorseless, and I don't say that lightly. I don't say that lightly at all because we don't like to think that anybody would be like that. The lack of remorse, the lack of caring, and just the callous disregard that you had for Kendi and how her death affected those around her. You had these same thoughts. You were talking about allowing people to live through your own self-control and restraint, understanding why people would kill their, quote, old ladies and go to prison. And so you're 58 years old. I don't see a lot of rehabilitation, sadly, in your future. Maybe, I mean perhaps, but that's not a significant mitigating factor in sentencing you.
The disgusting criminal maintained a straight demeanor, showing no remorse for his actions, while the judge continued to grill him.
But there is a severe punishment for your wife, and there's no sort of mitigation because the marriage is on the rocks, or the wife was unfaithful, or things like that. There's absolutely no justification here for your wife, and I think it's important that the sentence sends that message as well. I know beyond a reasonable doubt is that you strangled or asphyxiated your wife. You staged her to be found as if it were suicide. It's an outrageously egregious murder. And of course, all murder is, but this is particularly heinous in my view, having sat through the trial and seen all the evidence.
Soon after, the judge announced the sentence, and from the very beginning, it was clear what fate awaited this brutal individual.
The nature and gravity of the offense standing alone is sufficient to justify a fixed life sentence, and that is what I'm going to impose here. I think Kendi's family deserves to have that closure. The crime is so egregious that I don't think you should be released at any point in the future. And I don't impose that lightly. I have thought long and hard about this, considered all the evidence, considered aggravation and mitigation. There's just so little mitigation here. There's just really none.
The judge remained calm, measured, and compassionate throughout the proceeding. Finally, he read the sentence, providing a sense of justice and comfort to Kendi's family.
You find that a fixed life sentence is appropriate for the count of second degree. On the domestic violence charge, I'll impose 10-year sentence and run it concurrent. I didn't even speak about that. I mean, really, I don't mean to give that charge short shrift. The jury found that you were violent and abusive to your wife as well. It's just that, frankly, the killing alone subsumes it all in my view. And so I'm running that, the domestic violence charge of 10 years will run concurrent with your life sentence.
Howard was sentenced to life with no possibility of parole. It is relieving to know that the troubled man would be spending the rest of his life behind bars. While this dirty cop was taken to the cleaners in the courtroom, this next cop did the unthinkable and was rightly sentenced.
And he used his badge and he used his position to satisfy his own desires. He is a cop who turned into
Former Doralville police officer Miles Bryant was accused of rape and murdering 16-year-old Susana Morales. The disturbing case was tough to establish, but after 7 months after her mysterious death, the officer was charged and ultimately on trial.
He was supposed to serve and protect. Worked as a police officer for the City of Doralville Police Department. Somebody we should hold to a higher standard because of his role in enforcing the law. But he didn't do any of those things. Instead, he abused the law. And he used his badge and he used his position to satisfy his own sexual desires. He is a cop who turned into a killer. His victim, 16-year-old Susana Morales. Susana was in high school.
The 16-year-old was headed home when she was pulled over by this criminal cop. He kidnapped her and ended up murdering her. He then returned to his job in less than 24 hours after committing this heinous act, as Susana's family kept searching for her.
And Susana Morales, on the night of July 26, 2022, her precious life ended because of the defendant's desire to satisfy his own desires. 196 days of no information. 4,704 hours of absolutely no idea where their daughter was, where their sister was. 282,240 minutes. A man named Matthew Gilbert was driving down Highway 316 and pulled off on the side of Highway 316. He saw this trail that is right off the side of Highway 316. At that time, it was February, it was winter, there were no leaves on the trees, and it was pretty obvious like this. But in the summertime, you'll see that this area here is completely wooded.
Matthew Gilbert was off-roading when he discovered Susana's remains. This crucial discovery set the stage for identifying and capturing the real suspect.
In the middle of the woods, on that day, Mr. Gilbert stumbled across human remains. And at that moment, he stopped. You'll hear from him. Still with the black nail polish she had painted on her. She had hair that was dark on the top, with blonde hair on the bottom. They found her hair still there. And then here, very importantly, that she was naked. Her body was left there in the woods. They found absolutely not one shred of any fiber, any clothing, any socks, any pants, any shirt, any undergarments.
Despite her body being found in the woods, there was no evidence that would link the to Officer Miles. But just a day later, things took a turn for the worse for the cop.
The first piece of evidence was found the next day, February 7th of 2023. When the Grand County Police Department, which was here that night, they found her body very late in the day. And it became dark very quickly in February. So they secured the scene, they collected what they could, left police officers there to secure the scene, came back the next morning to continue. They located this. This is a Glock 19 9mm handgun. And underneath the barrel is an attached flashlight on this weapon. The gun in the woods near this girl's body. And so they wanted to know who it belonged to. And they found it was registered to the defendant, Miles Bryant. So they began to do a little more looking. How could his gun end up out there? What they found, and what you'll hear, is that the following morning after she went missing, July 27th, of 2022, the defendant called the Gwinnett County Police Department to report that gun stolen. He claimed
Miles's weapon was found at the crime scene, providing undeniable proof of his involvement in the horrific crime. The prosecutor relentlessly grilled him, emphasizing the cruelty and disgrace of his actions.
that less than 24 hours after the defendant kidnapped and murdered Suzanne Morales, he was back on shift working as a Doraville Police Department officer. Went into a quick trip incidents that his phones are there at the scene with her, that his gun is found at the scene. This is what you're going to hear from his own mouth. And then you're going to hear that Detective Carter asked him repeatedly, was it an accident? Did she fall and hit her head? No. I don't have anything to do with this. She didn't. Was it an overdose? Did she take something? No. It wasn't any of those things. It wasn't any accident. It wasn't anything. That's what you're going to hear from his own mouth. To come back and find the defendant guilty of malice murder, guilty of felony murder, guilty of kidnapping, guilty of criminal attempt to commit rape, and guilty of false report of crime.
Well, as the trial progressed, things were about to go from bad to worse, as the prosecutor interrogated an inmate who was with the defendant in prison, and what he revealed will leave you truly shocked.
Did you get to know him?
I wouldn't say I got to know him, but I mean, I talked to him.
Okay. How regularly would you talk to him?
Every day.
And before we get into the stuff that we're going to talk about, just generally, what kind of stuff would y'all talk about?
Anything, sports, what we did on the street, what we're going to do whenever we get out, if we get out.
What conversation did you have with him about some of the details of what was contained in the discovery?
I don't think I'm not going to get charged for this. They ain't got nothing against me. There's no. It says right here, plain. He says it says right here, plain. There's no blood, no nothing. They can't. They ain't got nothing against me.
So did he indicate to you that he was not going to be linked to the young girl's body because there was no blood or semen on her?
Yes.
Is that what he said?
He said there's no way this case can be put on me. It doesn't show that I was anywhere around her. It doesn't show no blood, no semen, no nothing.
At this point, Brian seems guilty as hell, and the inmate was about to expose this nasty criminal even more.
There was a conversation brought up one time. He said, someone could get the death penalty for something like this. I said, no, you gotta do something more brutal than that. And he said, well, so far they only got me charged with this one. He said, so far I'm only charged with one.
After plenty of hearings, the jury finally reached its verdict, and you will be satisfied that justice was served.
State of Georgia versus Miles Bryant. Indictment number 24B00156-4. Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, found the defendant guilty. Count 2, felony murder. We, the jury, found the defendant guilty. Count 3, kidnapping. We, the jury, found the defendant guilty. Count 4, criminal attempt to commit rape. We, the jury, found the defendant not guilty. Count 5, false report of a crime. We, the jury, found the defendant guilty. Signed June 12th, 2024 by the foreperson. Anything from the state or the defense?
Nothing on behalf of the state.
All right, we would ask that the jury be polled, please, ma'am.
Okay.
The ex-police officer was found guilty of every charge against him instead of just rape. That due to lack of evidence, as the body was found 7 months later. It is even difficult to comprehend how a law enforcement officer would even do something like this.
Mr. Bryant, you now have been convicted of 3 felonies. I want to inform you have a right to seek post-judgment relief from your felony convictions by either filing a direct appeal to a higher appellate court or to file a motion for a new trial. You have 30 days from the date I sign and file your sentence with the clerk of court to file a motion for new trial to any and all of the felony charges. Ms. Drake, are you going to file a motion for new trial?
Yes, ma'am, and I did discuss that with my client about that process.
Okay. You also have 4 years from the date of your sentence, from the date your sentence is final, to file a habeas corpus petition on the felonies. I'm going to appoint you an appellate lawyer to handle your case.
Susanna's family must have felt some relief after the jury's verdict. Just days later, the judge called the suspect back for sentencing, delivering yet another powerful and just decision.
Mr. Bryant, do you want to say anything?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you like to say anything? Go ahead.
No, you can just speak from there.
I just want to apologize to everybody and to the victim's family. Sorry,
That's it. Okay. Mr. Bryant, on count 1, malice, I sentence you to life without the possibility of parole. Count 2 and count 3, I believe, vacate as operation of law. Count 5, I sentence you to 12 months, which is the maximum I can, consecutive to your life without the possibility of parole. Thank you. You may go with the deputies.
Bryant rightfully got life in prison, and moments after this, Susanna's family was allowed to have some last words in the courtroom.
Susanna was my little sister. First of all, I just wanted to thank everybody for working on this case. All we ever wanted was justice for what happened to her. So I want to thank you for that. Sorry.
There's nothing to be sorry about.
I just ask that he receives the maximum sentence because no family, no mother, no father, no one deserves to go through this. And no one deserves to go through what he went through all these years. These 2 years, I'm sorry.
Jasmine, I'm so sorry you lost your sister. I'm so sorry. You lost your sister.
It was heartbreaking to witness as Susanna's sister broke down in tears. The judge showed remarkable compassion, listening to her with full attention, a rare and touching moment in the courtroom.
I just wanted to let you know what our family went through. Seeing my mom devastated every single day, not knowing what could happen to my sister was very, very disappointing, devastating. Seeing my mom not eat, not be able to sleep. Seeing my mom not wanting to cover herself, thinking that she could be somewhere lost, thinking the worst as the days pass. It's very, very hard not to think anything positive.
The family endured immense pain and trauma because of this predator, and while the verdict may bring some sense of justice, nothing can restore the happiness that was cruelly taken from them.
Had a different theory what could have happened to her. Maybe she got kidnapped. We didn't know anything. Every day was a new series in our mind, like a movie going through our heads. What was happening? What was she going through? Is she being held? Is she being forced to do something? I couldn't even have intimacy with my husband, thinking that she could have been being raped during that time. Seeing my mom lose weight that she never lost over years. She lost weight over 25 pounds during not knowing.
Next, this predator was caught in the worst situation possible and was rightfully sentenced to life.
The first degree. Defendant is guilty of the crime of to first degree and punishment is set at 30 years.
It is shocking to see how an officer behaves out with the public, thinking he would never be held accountable for his actions. However, this cop made a mistake so huge that it couldn't be ignored, and he was sentenced to over 200 years in prison. On June 18th, 2024, Officer Daniel Holtzclaw had completed his shift and was heading home when he conducted a traffic stop of a 57-year-old woman. During the stop, Daniel asked her to lift her skirt and take off her pants before he forced her to do oral sex right there on the road. The victim, Janie Liggins, reached the police department the next day and even submitted to a assault exam. As Daniel came onto his shift the very next day, he was welcomed by Detective Kim Davis, who was about to take him to the cleaners.
Tell me about that stop.
I was going westbound on Northeast 50th, probably a block just east of Lincoln. I see a red Grand Prix, or Grand Am, in my right lane, in the outside lane. I'm in the inside lane. The car swerves, and so at the time I'm thinking, okay, it's probably a drunk person, or maybe he got excited because they saw a cop. Made contact. It was a black female. Asked for license insurance. Stated that she didn't have insurance. Gave me an ID.
Do you make traffic stops normally after work?
I don't, but in that case, I saw her swerve and whatnot, so
I mean, yeah, I don't.
Felt.
Off work.
I know, I mean.
The officer had also turned off his computer and GPS while making the stop. Now, while the nature of the stop was illegal, what happened next assured that the officer was in huge trouble.
Okay, so you got her out of the car?
Yes.
Okay. And put her in the back of your car?
Yes.
Okay. Any problems there?
No, she was cooperative. Didn't give me any problems or whatnot.
So, did you run her on your MDT?
No, I didn't. All my stuff as far as that, because I didn't even call it in and say it was a traffic stop, my computer was off and everything as well.
Did you shut it off?
I just shut it off, yeah, on the way.
When you put her in your car, did you pat search her?
When I came around, I was like, lift up your shirt. Is there anything on you? Anything as far as your waistband or anything like that? She said no. And then I put her in the vehicle and went from there. Asked her everything.
Did your hands go on her at all?
I backhanded her on as far as the side.
Where on her body? Tell me. You backhanded
her waist, and the back portion. I didn't touch her butt or anything, but the back portion of the waist. And then she lifted it up like right here, and there's nothing.
Did she lift it up like this?
No.
Okay. So she never, like, went, ooh, nothing,
No.
exposed her or anything like that?
She asked me if I was like, no, it's okay.
She asked you.
Mr. Holtzclaw's reaction was quite calm and composed, something that you would never expect from an innocent cop who has been accused of such dirty things.
Did your hand go on her butt or anything?
No, that's not what I was saying. It was the hip, the side, not the section.
What about right here?
No.
You didn't?
No, I didn't.
They can tuck a gun
That's
right here.
why I asked to lift it up.
Oh, so she just kind of showed you her belly?
Right.
Okay. Well, was there anything, an accidental touch, anything?
If she thought it, when I pat searched her, but it was nothing as far as I felt like I would do anything as far or anything like that. For my safety, I just checked to see the weapons or anything.
And
to make clear, I didn't touch her butt, but the waist side and whatnot. If you would like me to do it for me to show you.
No, and I'm fine with it, and you have every right to do that. Right. She's saying that you made her lift up her shirt, and when she lifted up her shirt, she exposed her breasts.
No.
The case was only getting started, and Detective Kim realized this wouldn't be a one-time occurrence. As she dug further into the officer, she discovered 13 women who accused him of similar incidents. Shockingly, all of them were black women who had trouble with the law. It was seemingly obvious that Daniel considered them easy targets and was abusing them.
She said, she said she was doing this. When you said, is there anything inside your bra? And she was going, no, I don't have anything like that. Did she do that?
Yeah, she did, but I didn't look or anything like that.
Right.
And then she was like, do you want me to show you? I was like, no.
She said when she said, do you want me to show you? You said, yeah, and she went,
woo. No, I didn't.
But could she have been, woo, flashing you? And now you don't want to tell me because you're afraid you're going to get in trouble?
No, when I told her no, I said no.
Then she didn't go, yeah, no. Because sometimes drunk girls are
having a good time.
Yeah, right. But I'm asking you if she flashed you anyways.
I didn't see her. I didn't see her.
Okay. What about pants?
Nothing in her pants as far as I can see. She was wearing tight jeans. So
She said she pulled them down.
I didn't see it.
You didn't see her pull them down?
I didn't see her pulling down pants.
Did not see?
No, I did not see.
She's saying you shined your light on her.
I did not see her.
Where do you keep your flashlight?
The west side right here.
The detective wouldn't shy away as he tried to charm him and get everything out of him before it was too late. The other detective also proceeded to get his DNA, which would later prove fatal for him.
Did we buckle swap anybody in the academy?
I don't.
As a demonstration?
This ain't so bad, huh?
Well, I never had this done, so.
Stay up. There we go. And you get a free teeth cleaning with your first time.
You won't go none though.
All right, and then we're gonna have one more round.
I turned off my phone.
Pulled up a lot of video around that area after these allegations. Okay. She also had a SANE exam, which you know what that consists of.
Right.
There's a reason why we wanted your buckles. So if we go off the video and watch that,
right,
you're still going to stick with your story.
Yes, sir. I think everything covered as far as that.
Do you recall putting your in her mouth?
I don't.
Would you recall that if you did it?
If I did it, yeah.
At this point, the detectives were only interested in Janie's case, and they observed the officer's car standing for more than 25 minutes during the stop. Now, things were getting tough for Daniel, but despite the mounting pressure, he remained unfazed.
We knew you were on that stop.
Right.
We knew you were there. And we can watch a whole lot of actions being performed while you were there. Okay? And that's why she was trying to give you every out on the whole booby thing.
Right.
But any reason why this would be out?
No.
But if we say we didn't do it, we didn't do it, we didn't do it, and then the DNA comes back and says he did it, then we have a huge problem.
Right.
On the video, are we going to see?
Shouldn't see her boobs.
Okay. Are we going to see her pull her pants down?
I didn't see her pull it.
Okay. Are we going to see your penis?
Nope.
Are we going to see your penis in her mouth?
No.
Are we going to get any DNA to that?
No.
The detectives uncovered another victim, 43-year-old Terry Morris, who had reported being by Daniel a month earlier. Once again, Daniel had no explanation and refused to identify her.
Probably not necessarily going to remember the name, but her name is Terry Morris. Okay, black female. Supposedly you promised her a ride to the city rescue mission. This ring a bell?
No.
She thought you ran her for warrants. The clicking. Drove her around.
No. Name doesn't. I don't recall a name like that.
But she's claiming the same thing. The exact same thing. And here again, for whatever reason, things are pointing at you again. Traffic stop, not logged in, all that stuff.
The other girl that he's talking about is kind of making the same allegations, and that's weird.
Yeah, that's
doesn't look good.
I mean, that's
it doesn't
weird.
look. Yeah, it
That's
doesn't look
weird.
good. So, no, I don't.
The detective shifted to more general questions, probing into Daniel's personal life to uncover potential patterns.
Would you take a polygraph?
Yeah, if you want me to take a polygraph.
I mean, I'm trying to think of a solution. Do you know how slow DNA is?
I don't. I do not.
Slow.
When you went home, was anybody home?
My girlfriend was home.
Do you live with her?
Huh? No, she doesn't. She just stayed.
Did you get laid?
Messed around, yeah.
What's messed around?
I guess.
We were all adults.
We almost had. And she was.
What'd you do?
So, my. Got her vagina. And then maybe went a little bit in, and then she pushed me off and said, no, we don't want it. I'm tired. I was like, okay.
That's kind of mean to let it get that far and then stop.
So that's when you got home?
That's when I got home.
The detectives questioned Daniel about his relationship with his wife before returning to the main issue. The full extent of his abuse remains unknown, with countless women possibly having been victimized.
And she's sitting right here. If she goes like this, well, she's going to be looking right at you.
Okay. But it was just talking.
Let me ask you this, did you ever get a heart when you were talking to her? Because she could have.
I don't think
These
I got.
pants don't fit the greatest,
Right.
and if you get a, I'm going to be able to tell you got a hard on.
Right, and I'm pretty positive I didn't get a hard on.
Didn't get a hard on when you talked to her? Did your pants come unzipped, unbuttoned, anything while you were standing right there?
No.
CSI is processing your car right now.
Right.
And when we stepped out, they found some pubic hairs right in here. Could they be yours?
No, that's not. I didn't pull my penis out. I didn't do anything right there.
Did she?
No.
But do you think they could be?
No, it's not. No. Nothing of mine.
Your pubes couldn't be?
No.
Right there?
No.
Well, things were only about to get worse, as a week later, a 17-year-old girl claimed the officer stopped her and proceeded to rape her on her mother's porch.
You sure she just didn't flash you?
I can't. She did not flash. I don't want to say I can't recall, but I'm pretty positive she didn't flash.
I see a pair of titties.
She went like this, but nothing as far as I'm going like crazy looking.
Lifting the shirt.
No.
How far did she lift it?
When she lifted it up first, when I patted her down, she was like right here to her stomach line.
Did you see her belly?
Maybe some fat rolls or something. I don't know, but nothing.
Right, but I mean, could you see skin?
Yeah, I saw skin. Yeah. Like, I don't know.
You like older women?
I don't.
How old's your
She's 25.
Okay.
What's the oldest lady you've seen?
Maybe 29.
You ever seen a black woman?
I have. In high school, I have.
Holtzclaw failed to provide one good answer as to why this 57-year-old woman would make such a complaint against him when she had nothing to gain from it.
Anyway, those people are yours.
No, we're not. Please. Go.
I know. We're going to test it. It just takes. Anyway, your skin cells are going to be anywhere on her mouth.
No.
Skin cells from your fingers.
No.
Did you touch her body anywhere other than with the back of your hand, pat searching her?
Just pat search her, and that was about it. Didn't touch her face or anything.
Because if the tests come back, you ain't coming back in here.
Because we have a woman that says about, basically being sexually assaulted.
Right.
Okay? And we're calling it by force and all that. Big difference between that and a hookup.
Right. Nothing else.
But when she was standing, did she try to pull her pants down?
No.
Did she do, you said she kind of did like this. Did she ever do anything down here?
No.
You said you take the lie detector test.
Right.
Do you have any extra job? Is there a time when you can't take a lie detector test?
No. Usually it's all the times if I do. It's supposed to say policy. It's supposed to let them dispatch.
Who cares about policy right now? Because we don't at this point. Do you do the mileage and do all that? Or
can't here and there.
Sometimes you don't?
Sometimes I don't.
Okay.
Sometimes I don't.
Zip on back to this other deal. You're saying about 15-minute traffic stop. How long do you usually take on a traffic stop, just on average?
Maybe 20 minutes.
The disgraced officer denied every accusation the detective presented. It's hard to imagine what he was thinking, perhaps hoping for some leniency, which was no longer an option.
20 minutes. Now that's going to be some 800 time, right?
800, searching the car in detail, all of that.
Okay, so doing all of that, all the running, waiting in line, and even on a search. Now, the question I have is we got a lapse of time here, so I'm kind of get a better handle on where the time went. You're talking about 15 minutes, no 800, no running on the computer, you shut it down. And you said it was just a quick little search of the car. Where's the rest of that time?
Just talking to her.
About what?
Just see where you're going. Trying to get her to confess, are you drunk or not? Like, are you been drinking? Because I could smell it when I was in the car, but I can't really get it.
What if she said, yes, I'm drunk?
I didn't hear a lot of drunk questions, like how much
have you been drinking? Mainly it's just have you been drinking, trying to get her confessed. See anything inside that juice? No. Just trying to talk to her. But,
okay, right there, those questions maybe took 40 seconds. 15 minutes?
And you said 5 at the car. So then we got 10 of a lot of questions.
Right.
Okay. I mean, you tell me I wasn't there. I mean, obviously I don't have any audio.
And that's what I'm saying. roughly on a traffic stop take about 20 minutes. It was the quickest traffic stop.
The detectives then proceeded to ask him the key question as to what he was doing during the whole time, if there was no ticket being issued.
How could you take 15 minutes on that?
Just talking. I must have been talking. So.
I can't see her wanting to talk if she's crying and asking if you're going to shoot her and all this. I don't see her being real forthcoming with conversation.
Whether my questions or whatnot, that's it.
I mean, you don't seem, I mean, I don't know how you were out there, but just kind of talking with you, I mean, you seem real laid back and everything like that. I've never got the impression of just kind of an angry type cop. We know some.
So you don't think 15 minutes was too long on that traffic stop?
No,
And nothing said during that 15 minutes?
Nothing said.
Sensing something was off, Detective Kim decided to call Officer Daniel's wife. She was about to uncover the first of many lies that he had told.
I just talked to Carrie.
Okay.
She said she was asleep when you got home and you did not try to have sex, and you did not have sex.
They tried to have sex.
She said you didn't. And I asked her, could you have been asleep? And you had kind of, no. And she said no. You did not try to have sex.
As much as I don't want to involve her, I tried to have sex and she was asleep. Carrie goes to sleep pretty early, about 9, 10 at the late.
Okay, but she would know if you tried. I'm a woman.
I know.
And my husband comes home in the middle of the night and I'm like, are you kidding me? I've been asleep. You said you twirled around her
I did.
and you put it in a little bit and then she said, I'm tired. No.
I did.
She would remember that to tell me.
Shoot. Maybe.
She said you did not try to have sex.
That was something Daniel definitely didn't want to happen. He had been proven wrong, and the list of lies was only going to increase from here.
I don't know what to say, because it just looks like I just caught you in a lie, and now I don't know what to believe.
I'm telling you.
I don't know what to believe.
Okay.
Because you tell me this, I go to verify it, she tells me the opposite, and now I'm wondering what you're telling the truth about.
Maybe because she doesn't know what the heck's going on.
No, she doesn't. I didn't tell her.
And I'm glad, but detectives calling her, any other officer asking her a question like that.
I know.
She may be scared.
Given the story that you're not given.
I'm telling you, I try to ask Carrie, my girlfriend.
She is going to remember your wing twirling around her hoo-ha. You remember that. I'm sorry, I don't care how much of a sleeper you are. You remember because it pisses you off in the middle of the night and you go, are you serious? Don't bother me with that.
At the end of it all, Daniel was asked to give up his badge, uniform, and gun while he was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation.
I think you're gonna need to, unless you want to keep the shirt on. I don't know. I don't know if this shirt's gonna be big enough for you. You're a big old boy. Well, you can get home. You need some pants. Why don't you go ahead and get dressed then?
I need to tell you what's going on. It's crazy. I said, I'm basically on my way home, and I'd like to talk to you. What's going on? It's crazy.
His uniform was sent in for DNA testing, and 17-year-old Adara Gardner's DNA was found on the zipper of his pants. As 13 women came forward, he was ultimately charged with 36 charges, including sexual assault, oral and stalking. It took quite a lengthy trial for the jury to establish their verdict, as Officer Daniel pled not guilty to every charge and claimed that he had nothing to do with this. But the jury saw this all quite differently.
Verdict, count 1, sexual battery. We, the jury, impaneled and sworn in the above entitled cause, do upon our oaths find as follows. Defendant is guilty of the crime of battery and set punishment at 8 years. Count 2, procuring lewd exhibition. Not guilty of the crime of procuring exhibition. Defendant is not guilty of the crime of sexual battery. Count 8, Defendant is guilty of the crime of forcible oral assault and punishment is set at 20 years. Count 9, first degree. Defendant is not guilty of the crime in the first degree.
Daniel Holtzclaw was found guilty on 18 of these charges, as the jury eventually discarded some of the women's claims as the evidence was not found.
Count 16, forcible oral. Defendant is guilty of the crime of forcible sodomy and punishment is set at 16 years. Count 17, forcible oral sodomy. Defendant is not guilty of the crime of forcible oral sodomy. Count 18, procuring exhibition. Defendant is not guilty of the crime of procuring exhibition. Count 28, rape first degree. Defendant is guilty of the crime of the first degree and punishment is set at 30 years. Count 29, first degree. Defendant is guilty of the crime of rape first degree and punishment is set at 30 years. Count 30, battery. Defendant is guilty of the crime of battery and punishment is set at 8 years. Count 31, second degree by instrumentation. Defendant is guilty of the crime of second degree and punishment is set at 12 years.
The convicted rapist pleaded his innocence in the courtroom despite the overwhelming evidence against him.
Mr. Holtzclaw, this jury finds you guilty of the various counts. You will be remanded to the custody of the Oklahoma County Sheriff for formal sentencing set January 21st, 2016 at 10 o'clock a.m. All right, you have a seat.
He was later sentenced to 263 years in prison and has tried multiple times to appeal the decision, but to no avail. This dangerous creep will surely spend the rest of his life behind bars. Well, this brings us to the end of the video. Today we witnessed the shocking case of a police officer turned. It is devastating to see a protector become a predator. The only solace in his sentence ensuring that he can never harm anyone again. If you agree, please support us by liking this video. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to check out some of the other most breathtaking courtroom moments of all time.
I would ask you to, as part of this sentencing, to grant me 5 minutes in a locked room with this demon.